Hey everybody, I'm Will Martin. So today I read a news article that described a nurse practitioner who happened to be in the right or the wrong place at the right or wrong time back a few years ago. She was working in a busy emergency department in New York City when the staff learned that there would be a reality TV show taking place in the ED. Now, those who have worked in emergency departments know that it's a reality TV show pretty much every day. But in this case, ABC, the network, approached the hospital with the idea of filming the reality TV show. And there was a famous cardiovascular surgeon who was kind of behind this. And as a matter of fact, this surgeon ran for a Senate seat just this past year and just narrowly lost. So if you know who I'm talking about. So the nurse practitioner basically didn't like how nurses were being depicted on television shows and in movies and thought that this might be a good opportunity to change some of that. So she quickly garnered the attention of the show's producers when they started filming and decided that she was pretty good camera material. She was loud, she was opinionated, she had moxie, and she appeared very capable as a nurse. She was spotlighted on nearly every episode during the first season. And when the second season was announced, the producers had decided that they were going to stay with the same cast. So, of course, the decision didn't sit well with some of the other nurses in the emergency department who felt that this nurse was letting some fame go to her head. Of course, they all wanted a shot at fame themselves, or at least some of them did, even if it was only 15 minutes worth of fame. And apparently, this opinion wasn't limited just to the other staff nurses in the ED. The supervisors of this nurse were suddenly paying more attention to her, and they were citing her for minor infractions that normally might be overlooked, or at least handled in a little bit more measured way. According to reports, there was one infraction that would cost this nurse her job in the emergency department. A VIP had arrived at the busy ED and was told by this nurse that he would have to sit and wait in the waiting room along with everybody else and wait his turn. So anybody who's ever worked in any sort of service industry, I don't care if it's restaurant work or healthcare, anywhere, you know that this is a pretty familiar scenario. When a VIP arrives, administration suddenly arrives on the scene shortly afterwards, and the expectation is that all of the normal workflows are going to go out the window and you're going to serve the VIP. Well, as usually the case here, the VIP won and the nurse lost. So this really led to an expanding personnel file for this nurse, I'm sure. The final nail in the employment coffin for this nurse came when the nurse posted a photograph of the trauma bay shortly after a trauma resuscitation had happened. And for those who've never seen a trauma bay after resuscitation, it's a bloody mess. And by bloody, I mean sanguine, not the word as the Brits use. The photo, which I've never seen, but it was posted on Instagram, and I don't currently do Instagram either, but it showed a lot of blood, a lot of tubes and syringes, and probably some torn or cut off clothing, and just a general mess that you typically see in the trauma bay after a trauma. The fact is, this is reality. When saving a life, whether it's on a street corner, in the back of an ambulance, or in the emergency department, the aftermath is pretty shocking for those that are naive to the scenario. I'm told that there were no items in the photo that would identify either the patient or the hospital. Nevertheless, the administration of the hospital deemed that the photograph was insensitive and unprofessional. So the nurse was escorted off the hospital property. Obviously, she was fired, and it thus ended her practice in that emergency department. So there's other components to this story. I'm told that a physician also posted the same photo on his social media account and faced no repercussions. The captioning was perhaps different in his case and perhaps a little more tasteful, but the photo was the same. If you've ever been subjected to a local hospital ad on television, and if they feature nurses at all, usually it's some slow motion, soft filtered video with nurses cradling a baby, or listening to an elderly man at below eye level. It's soft, it's caring, it's predictable. And what it really isn't is, in some cases, real. I mean, yes, we all hope that if we're cared for by a nurse, he or she will be patient, caring, compassionate, all the things that any human would want. And I'll say that after having worked for over 27 years in emergency medicine, I'm still amazed that we're able to find young men and women who can offer that care and compassion in our current environment. I notice it more because I'm getting older, and I wonder, when it's my turn to lay in one of those ED beds, completely helpless, powerless, and totally dependent on the care and compassion of another human being. But the reality is, healthcare, whether you're a nurse, advanced practice provider, physician, respiratory therapist, rad tech, or really anybody that cares for patients, it's often a brutal situation. Healthcare staff is sometimes doing more with less, but I don't think that's the real problem. The real problem is much more than just low staffing numbers. To be honest, in most cases, we're overstaffed on the physician, PA, and NP level. And I think that's true in a lot of emergency departments. But we are understaffed in every other level, from nurses to housekeepers and beyond. But that's still, I don't think, the real problem. There seems to be a push to do more with less, keep your mouth shut, and just continue to do it. And it's easy to blame hospital administration, but I don't really think that they're the total antagonists here. After all, they're responsible for making our work pay out. They're responsible for us getting a paycheck. And as much as we'd like to think that we're the driving force behind patient care, if we didn't get paid, I don't think many of us would be hanging around. After all, I know very little to nothing about the complexities of translating my work into reimbursement checks. The insurance company is in control. And I think that that's probably where some of this blame really does lie. And that's something that we should talk about another time. Hospital administrators are often extremely well compensated, as we know. And you can certainly complain about that, but I think complaining about it is the low-hanging fruit of the situation. Again, I'd like to blame insurance companies and the federal government for the problems that exist in healthcare, and I think we'll do that. We'll do that at some point in another video. For right now, I want to keep the discussion on the local level, at the hospital. The nurse that I've been speaking about was trying to educate the public on what healthcare really is, at least in the emergency department. Perhaps her approach to that education could have been a little bit more elegant, but it's clear that hospitals don't want that brutal reality exposed. Unless, of course, you have a visit to the ED. In that case, you'll get a firsthand education on what happens in healthcare. And if you had the chance to watch any of that television program that featured this nurse, you'll immediately pick up on what she was laying down as you sit in the waiting room that sometimes resembles the apocalypse, or you may get a front row seat to the minute-by-minute activities that happen in the ED if we put you in the hallway, which unfortunately we oftentimes have to. So I want to get back to this nurse. She was actually a nurse practitioner and a nurse. She was fired from her ED job, as I said, and she went on to other things. She did try to get back into nursing, and she did some travel contracts, including a COVID contract, and she wound up catching COVID from that contract, wound up in the hospital as a result of it. She tried to get other jobs in nursing, but she was finding out that her notoriety from that television show kind of made her more or less unemployable. So she branched out in other ways. She started a podcast, and she kind of worked on her social media presence. More interestingly, she's tried her hand as a stand-up comedian. I guess that didn't pan out for her, but she has found other ways to support herself. And due to her brush with fame, she's been occasionally hired to promote products and has a dedicated following on her podcast, so I'm told. Full disclosure, I've never listened to her podcast, and unfortunately, I looked it up, and I don't see that it's been active since August of 2022. If anyone's interested or curious, I'll leave a link to that podcast and her website in the description. So if there's a moral to this story, it's that you have a right to speak your mind so long as you accept the consequences of your actions. And although your speech is your choice, in most cases it's your employer's choice whether they want to hire or retain you. Be careful. We live in a world where so many things that were acceptable maybe 10 years ago will now land you in a lot of hot water. If you're young, you have bills to pay, and you have a career to build. Nurture it and measure your actions when it comes to controversy. Those aren't the words of advice that I'd like to give you. I'd like to say, stand up for yourself, and when you see wrongdoing, point it out. Remember the phrase, see something, say something, that we heard after 9/11. Well, I guess that only pertains to suspicious acts of terrorism and not suspicious acts in healthcare. Until next time, thank you. If you found this interesting, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.